sheet or these sheets out to you because I used to do this. It's actually kind of a real pain to set up. So I got out of practice, and then I started having problems with students that would probably be avoided by continuing this, doing it. So in Blackboard, I can generate a grade report from the gradebook function on my side as an instructor, which lists all the assignments in order that they're in the gradebook. It's essentially the same thing that you see if you go to the My Grades section in Blackboard. But My Grades has always been kind of annoying from what I can tell because it gives it to you in a weird order, and sometimes it only shows you the stuff that you've actually opened and worked on, and students can sometimes overlook assignments that they just haven't attempted yet. So this shows you everything. I finished up the grading this morning for you guys. So this is the most current grading that I have for you. If you've done anything this morning since, let's say, 9 o'clock, that's not factored in. But over in the score column, for the things that you see a hyphen or a dash in that spot, that means it's an assignment that you have not opened up and even attempted. So there's no score whatsoever. If you've opened an assignment but not submitted it, then you'll see in progress in that column. Since this is, I printed this out right after I got cut up on grading, you would not see, but I should say this. On the website, the in progress is represented by a blue circle that I think is supposed to look like a clock, meaning that you're whatever. And then what you would not see in what I handed out to you, because I cut up on the grading, is it could say needs grading. But when you've completed something that I need to check off or manually grade, on Blackboard you see a green circle with an exclamation point in it. Okay. And then obviously if there's a score there, you've submitted it and I've graded it. So I've given you 2 copies of this report. And the first one is essentially what you should be familiar with if you're paying attention to your score, your grades in Blackboard. The second one probably is scaring the hell out of you, and that's kind of on purpose. The grade that you see in Blackboard is only based on the assignments that you've completed and I've graded. So anything that hasn't even been attempted or that is waiting to be graded, which of course right now shouldn't be anything, isn't factored in. So if you look at the first one, it says you have an A-. That's because you've been doing very well on the assignments that you've done so far. And if you look at the second one and it says you have an F, that just means that you have not done a whole lot of assignments, enough that the zeros that are attributed to those assignments brings your grade down below 60%. So really, that's your real grade. I just don't have Blackboard show you that grade, show you the grade in that fashion, because it would sap all of your motivation to complete this course, because everything you did would seem for naught, because it would never change that F until you get to the end of the semester. So I have it do the running total during the semester so that you see what your grade based on the work that you're doing. But really, at the end of the semester, when you come in to take the practical on the final exam day, I'm going to shut off access to Blackboard, and I'm going to shift from the running total to the all assignments included version, the real grade, so that anything that you haven't completed will get marked as a 0. One shortcoming of these reports that the My Grade stuff doesn't do, or does do, this does not show you the exemptions you have for makeup assignments. Now, in doing this, so that it would accurately reflect things, including the fact that you might be exempt from some of those assignments. I put all of those in. It's up to date, I think, through the urinary system, which actually today is part of the urinary system. And so all of you that are here listening to me today, whatever exemption I've given you based on the urinary system counts because you're obviously here. And anybody that's not here, I have to go in and unexempt them from that assignment. But I have not done the reproductive system because we're not even in that part of the class, and so I don't know if you're going to be here or not these days. But everything else is up to date on exemptions. And so if you look at a makeup assignment on this report, and there's a dash there because you haven't attempted that, it doesn't tell you if you have to attempt that here. Look on my grades, and you will see a gray circle next to where the score goes on my grades, and that means that you're exempt. And if you need some reinforcement to understand that's the case, hold the mouse over the gray circle, and a little word exempt will pop up. That's the alternate text for that gray circle. So that tells you that you're exempt from that. If you do not see a gray circle on anything except for the reproductive system makeup assignment, then that means that I have you in my grade book as either late or absent for one of the classes having to do with that assignment. Okay. Yeah.
So would we have to look for that gray circle for, because remember in the beginning you said we can use the makeup assignment for the ear and eye thing for the lab? Would that be exempt?
No. What I said is you can watch the videos for the ear and eye makeup assignment to get the information to complete the lab quiz. That didn't mean do the makeup assignment instead of the lab quiz. That meant that's...
No, I did do it. I'm saying like it said it's in progress because I opened it.
Oh, right, exactly. So you don't have to complete that. That was just, you're opening it up to look at the video makes the system think that you started the assignment. So yeah, if you were here, I can't remember now, because that would have been, I don't remember the beginning of the semester very well, exactly how it works out. It's different for different classes because of my not being here the first week. But yeah, if it says in progress, you probably went in there to look at the videos, but don't worry about it. You're probably exempt from it. And you'll see on my grades if you're exempt or not. So the second version, the all-included, the version that's supposed to scare you is so that you understand that if you said, oh, gee, I have an A- in this class right now, I'm not going to do any more work, that's what you would actually get for a grade. Okay, if you just said, I'm done. I have been dealing this semester with a student who's a little bit of, well, I won't go there because I'm recording this. I'm dealing with a student from last semester who did not get the grade she expected. And one of her arguments was I was looking on Blackboard and it said I had a B. And then when I looked at my grade, it said I had a C. What happened? And what it was is she had put off a lot of the work till the last minute. She submitted like 5 or 6 of the Part 4 assignments from the semester on the last day, which was like December 18th. And in that, she was rushing to get stuff done at the last minute, and so she put in really poor work. She just did not answer the questions very well. The one that just really sticks out in my mind was there's a question in the immune system one about what did you learn from the first half of the podcast about hookworms that helps you understand what Jasper did to prepare samples? Her answer was he defecates. Okay. That's not at all what the question's asking. The question's asking what did you learn from the first half of the podcast that tells you about how he prepared his samples. He always defecates. That's not how he prepares his samples. Okay. The samples are available because he defecated, but there's something about the first half of the podcast that tells you about how he deals with what comes out of his rear end, as he put it in the podcast. So that was indicative of the kind of questions that she answered. And so she got like 3 points or less on a lot of those Part 4 assignments, which made her B that she saw drop down to a C. And she's really trying to argue that she should have had a better grade because that was the impression she got from Blackboard. if I had put into Blackboard the real grade, what here is the all assignments included grade, and she would have seen that she didn't have a B all along, then she and all of the other students would have probably said, ah, hell, here it is, December, and I still have an F. There's no point in trying. And it's just because they hadn't completed all the work to get to the point of having an actual grade. So that's there to scare you and to let you know that that's really what your grade looks like at this point. You probably have a lot of stuff that you haven't done, which might hopefully only be the urinary and reproductive system stuff, but that's enough to bring you down to a very low grade just because it doesn't exist, and then that version of your grade is counted as a 0 until you do it. Okay, so don't freak out. That doesn't mean that you're going to fail the class. That just means that you have some work to do before the end of the semester. Yeah. I would suggest you use this report sort of as a checklist. Anything that you have a score in there, right, you're good to go. Just go ahead and make sure you complete everything else that doesn't have a score there. Or if it says in progress, be sure you go back in there and submit it. At the end of the semester, oh, question?
Yeah, with first text message has been progress.
So, if you, on those first 3 things there, those were extra credit for before the first week. For each of them, you had to do something to get those points. So when you sent your first text message, I replied with instructions on what to do to get those points. When you completed the attendance app data form, it said what you should do to get the points for that in Blackboard. It just, each of those is an assignment, okay? Normal assignment looking thing, you go into the assignment and there's a blank for you to enter something in. And I told you what to put in to that assignment in response to your first text. So go back and find that text and find where I replied to it and put the points in. And if you don't have the reply to that because you've already deleted the text, sucks to be you. Okay. But if, so on the text one, you're kind of SOL on that one. But for the attendance app data one, if you haven't put anything in there, go back in. You can fill out the form again. You can open the form and not really fill it out, but submit it, and you'll see the instructions about what you're supposed to do to get those credits. And then for the profile picture, you didn't have to do anything there. You submitted the profile picture, and so it came up in my grade thing. So I gave you points when there was a picture there. If you didn't submit a picture and you'd like to have 5 extra points, go ahead and put one in. Okay. I'll go ahead and take those up until the last minute because I'm feeling really generous this semester. Last semester, after the first week, I stopped giving extra credit points on this. Yeah, so you're welcome to do those, and those are just extra points added in. They don't affect the total number of points that your grade is divided by, just it ups things there in the end. So, I was saying something, wait a second. Oh, go ahead before I try to figure out what it is.
And the concepts you're just adding in after.
Oh, yeah, thanks for reminding me of that. I should say this, I've been forgetting to say it in all my classes. I have not put anything in about concept coach stuff. Originally, I had said that you get 2 points for completing them on time, 1 point for completing them after the date, and 0 points for not completing them. As a pilot program, it didn't quite go the way I had hoped for that aspect of it, grading things. So actually what I'm gonna do, and I'm not gonna tell any of my other students this, except for the ones that are listening. What I'm actually gonna do is if you completed them at any point, you'll get full credit for them. And if you didn't complete them at any point, then you'll get 0 points. I will put another entry into the gradebook that's, I think there's 12 chapters worth or something like that. And so there'll be 24 points, and if you completed those concept coaches at any time, and you can still complete them before the end of the semester, then you'll get the credit for those, and they'll just go in as another time. John?
Is there any way you can see the ones that maybe we missed and forgot to submit? So we can see which ones we completed or not?
you can go into your name. Up at the top, it says in progress, and it shows everything that you've done. Once you hit that picture of the computer, you can go in, and it says in progress right next to your name up at the top right, and it tells you everything that you've done.
Yeah.
I mean, I can pull up a
In every
list
section.
of everybody's attempts and see who's done what. The reason I'm not gonna impose having done it by the specific date is because when I do that, it doesn't tell me when you submitted it. So I can't tell easily when you got it in, if you got it in time or not. So you're just getting credit for doing it, full credit for doing it, no credit for not doing it. But yeah, apparently, I don't really know what the student interface looks like on Concept Coach. So apparently somewhere in there, you can click on something and it'll tell you what you completed of the assignments for the thing. Now, it doesn't actually know if you're an AP1 or AP2, so it's probably just gonna tell you for the whole book. You guys, of course, are not responsible for chapters 1 through 14. Nope, I take that back. 1 through 13 and 16. Okay, those are AP1 chapters. Chapter 14 is the somatic nervous system, and the first of the 3 parts is the one on the sensory stuff. It'd be great if you did all 3 parts, but if you only get the sensory system thing done, which might be technically what I said. Actually, I can look that up.
If you said each part of each chapter.
Well, yeah, but the reading assignment for chapter 14, the reassignment is just the first module of the chapter, 14.1. You may want to read the rest of the chapter, remind yourself of the first one, this is so relevant. Oh, it doesn't make, okay, it's kind of vaguely worded here. At the end of each module, you need to complete the concept of assignment. If in chapter 14, you only did the concept coach for the sensory section, 14.1, and you didn't do it for 14.2 or 14.3, you'll still get full credit there.
Okay.
But if you did do them, you'll get credit. Of course. Yeah, and I'll just add in, I haven't even put it in the gradebook yet, but I will put in something there about concept coach stuff. I completely forgot to say that to my other classes, so there you go. Okay, there was something I was talking about before your question came up, and now I think I've completely lost it. Anybody remember what I was talking about? Sorry?
You said before the end of the class.
That didn't really help a whole lot. I don't know. I'll have to go back to the tape later on. Maybe I'll bring it up. Sorry?
This stuff.
Yeah, about that stuff.
Before you went to concept coach.
Yeah, but I can't remember what I was saying about that stuff today. Yeah. I might go back and listen to what got recorded, and that'll help. But and I might say something on Thursday if it comes back to me, but I don't remember what it was. Yes, use this as a checklist, sort of, to make sure you get everything done. You need to have everything done before you come in for the in-class portion of the practical on the 12th. Yeah, which is Thursday next week, right? Yes. Yeah, so we have class obviously today and then on Thursday, and we have class of Tuesday next week, which is the last day of classes for the semester. And then final exams start on Thursday the 12th, and your final exam is scheduled for 11 o'clock. It will be in room 500, where we have lab normally. And both lab groups are coming at the same time. It's for everybody in the class to take that test. And, oh, I should think about this. Okay. What I was just checking is how many people are actually in the class. There's only 24 seats in there. So if there were more than 24 people in the class total, then we'd have a problem. But it's fine. There's actually only going to be 18 people in the class. So I think that's everything. Oh, one more thing, which is not the thing I forgot what I was saying. So, There is the attendance policy that if you've missed for this class, I ended up making it 4 lecture lab meetings. You wouldn't be allowed to take the final exam. I went through and checked that. And if that were the case, I would have written on the top of the thing I just handed out to you saying that you weren't going to be able to take that, but none of you are in that situation. So everybody came to class often enough to be able to take the in-class portion of the practical. If you are wondering about that, don't freak out. If you're here, then that doesn't apply. People it does apply to aren't here anyways. So, okay, I think that's everything. So let's get on with stuff. So if I remember correctly, last time I kind of rushed to make sure I finished up the filtration portion. I was talking about the glomerulus and that stuff. Is that right? Is that where I did? Sorry? Seriously?
Yeah, the zygote, that was the end.
I thought we were in urinary system still.
No. 5 to 16. Yeah.
Reproductive system,
We
46
did the male,
chromosomes,
male.
Oh, yeah,
X's mother,
that's-
4 is
that's
father,
true.
the whole mitosis.
This is
Those
lab.
labs.
Yeah, lab.
Yeah,
and
and
lectures.
Yeah, we're still in the urinary system.
That's what different
Yeah.
places. Okay.
Oh, urinary system.
Okay. So, well, that's the nature of AMP2. Things get off between the two. So we talked about glomerular filtration rate. I talked about the opposing forces at the glomerulus.
Yeah.
Okay. And net filtration. Did I talk? Oh, no, that doesn't come up yet. Okay, so I believe I stopped there and said, okay, we're going to continue on with reabsorption and the rest of what goes on in the nephron later. This figure is just a summary of where different things are reabsorbed into the blood, which is represented by arrows coming out of the nephron, and where things are excreted back into the nephron from the blood, represented by arrows going into the nephron. And there's a little color difference there, if you can see that. And the very first thing that happens, all of these things are reabsorbed, which includes glucose and amino acids, and any proteins that might be present, vitamins, et cetera, et cetera. But it also includes urea, uric acid, and lactate, which technically is lactic acid. Those things will get reabsorbed because they're molecularly similar to other things that end up back in the blood. And then eventually they're going to, or not eventually, but fairly soon, they're going to be re-excreted into the nephron because that's where we actually want them to go. And then there are a few other things that are tweaked here and there. Going down the nephron loop, water comes out, water is reabsorbed into the blood. And then going back up the loop, sodium chloride and a little bit of potassium gets reabsorbed, which is actually important for concentrating wastes in the urine, which I think comes up a little bit later on. Just a table kind of breaking down all the different things where they're reabsorbed or secreted along the line. Oh, stop. Sorry, trying to just open that picture. Okay, so this picture is just kind of an overview of how a lot of things are reabsorbed from the nephron. So this side of the picture, the lumen of the proximal tubule, represents the filtrate. So this is everything that's coming out of the blood. And so a number of things move back into the blood. So here we have calcium, we have sodium everywhere. Amino acids, glucose, phosphates, magnesium, water, those sort of things. Most of this is actually tied to the transport of sodium. So on the basal side of this cell is a sodium-potassium pump. Okay, so ATP is hydrolyzed to force sodium out of the cell and potassium back into the cell. This is the exact same molecule that we met way back in chapter 12 in NP1 that helps to maintain the resting membrane potential in neurons. It's a almost universal molecule for cells. There are all sorts of things that cells do that require building up a concentration gradient for sodium. So by pumping sodium out of the cell, the concentration of sodium inside of the cell is pretty low. And so sodium that has been filtered out into the filtrate gets reabsorbed because of that concentration gradient. And a bunch of stuff is tied to that movement of sodium. Really in all of these, it shows sodium coming in causes hydrogen ions to go out. Okay. Chloride can be pulled in with sodium. Calcium can be pulled in with sodium. Amino acids can be pulled in with sodium. Glucose can be pulled in with sodium. Phosphate can be pulled in with sodium. So each of these things, although they kind of look like the exact same white arrow circle, represent different molecules that all co-transport sodium and something else. The sodium and amino acid glucose transport things here are exactly the same as what we find in the digestive system. So going back to the digestive system, let me just remind you of this. In the absorption section, absorption, come on. There we go. Here it's saying that glucose and galactose, which is very similar, are co-transported with sodium ions, and amino acids are co-transported with sodium ions. That's the exact same thing. Okay, so in the lining of your intestines, a sodium-potassium pump sets up a sodium gradient. And as sodium comes in from the lumen of your digestive tract, it pulls with it the nutrient molecules like amino acids and glucose. Here where we say glucose, that's just the most prevalent of the monosaccharides, but galactose could potentially be there also. But probably more likely the galactose has been converted to glucose somewhere since it was absorbed in the digestive tract. But this is the exact same mechanism. So the transport molecules represented by these circles, those proteins are exactly the same proteins that are used on the apical surface of small intestine cells to transport those things in. Because really, it's the same thing. We have nutrients on the apical surface or on the lumen side of these cells, and we want to get it into the blood. And so whether it's the urinary or the digestive system, transport of these nutrient molecules is just tied to a sodium concentration. And probably some of these other mechanisms are similar to the digestive system also. I'm just well aware of the amino acid and glucose one. This is a picture of a similar cell, but it's just highlighting what's happening to help regulate pH. So I'm not quite sure if what they're showing here is technically a sodium hydrogen ion antiporter molecule, or if it's just a shorthand for sodium potassium pump and co-transport of hydrogen somewhere else. But however it is, sodium gets pumped out of the cell. It's an energetic process that requires ATP. And either tied to that directly or indirectly, hydrogen ions that might have built up in your blood, affecting your blood pH, can be excreted directly out of the system. And here they have sodium in and hydrogen out, which was actually in the picture I just showed you also, pretty much for all of them. So anytime that sodium's coming in, hydrogen is going to be going out. It's just within the within the cytoplasm of the cell and also in the lumen here, we have the carbonic anhydrase reactions. So carbonic acid is formed from carbon dioxide and water. And so we got H2CO3. The enzyme actually causes that to happen. It dissociates into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. We get rid of those things. It might seem in this picture that it's a little weird to have the exact same reactions happening on either side of the membrane, but they aren't necessarily happening. So these reactions in the cell and these reactions in the lumen are kind of the same thing. It might seem kind of strange that they're both drawn in there, but really, it depends on the particular circumstances, what pH is in your body and how much hydrogen ions you have to get rid of, and moving CO2 through the system and that kind of stuff. So this is just an overview of where these reactions take place, but they're tied to how the nephrons, specifically in the proximal convoluted tubules, will help regulate pH. What is not specifically drawn into this picture is what happens to the bicarbonate ion that's inside the cell. That's actually going to go through the basal surface of the cell and into the bloodstream to help buffer blood pH there. Because it's not going to do a whole lot of good just hanging out in the cell, so it's going to go out here too. Which I think they kind of suggest by this sodium plus sodium here, but I don't, it's a weird way to write it. But that's happening in these cells also. Now, I pointed out in sort of the overview picture at the top of the section that in the loop of nephron loop going down, water comes out, and then on the other side, sodium and chloride, and a little bit of potassium. This picture shows a little bit more in depth what's going on here. The tissue in the medullary pyramid gets increasingly more concentrated extracellular fluid. We measure concentration of bodily fluids in this unit here, which we don't use a whole lot in this course, but it's milliosmoles per kilogram. And the general value for that for all of your bodily fluids is 300. Okay? So here where it says 300, that's essentially how concentrated bodily fluids are throughout your body. And then as we go deeper and deeper into the medullary pyramid, the concentration of stuff in the extracellular fluid increases. Okay? Until we get down to the bottom of the medullary pyramid where it's about 1,200 of these units. So using this increasing concentration gradient going down through the medullary pyramid, the loop in the nephron can force water out because if this is 300 of those units, it's equal here, but as we go down, at this point, if it's still 300 of those units here, the fluid inside the tubule is going to be hypotonic compared to the extracellular fluid outside the tubule. And water will always move from hypotonic to hypertonic compartments across the membrane. This membrane doesn't let anything else through. Urea can, but just water. None of the solutes in the extracellular fluid will move in here to make the fluid inside more concentrated, so instead the water moves out, effectively trying to dilute the tissue, but really what it's doing is making what's in here more concentrated. So as you go down deeper and deeper, the fluid inside the loop is getting more and more concentrated as water is pulled out by osmotic pressure. Then, after we get to the bottom of the loop, the wall of the loop changes and it becomes thicker, and in the wall are, it will not let water pass through. So as we go back up through the now decreasing concentration, it would seem if water came out on this side, we'd expect water to come in on this side to dilute it back. But that doesn't happen. Water can't get across this wall. So as it goes up, to maintain the concentration of the fluid here, instead the filtrate in the loop gets less concentrated by expelling sodium chloride for the most part. So all in all, it becomes a more and more dilute solution as it goes back up, but it's specifically getting rid of sodium chloride, so what's left are all the waste molecules that are going to be an increasingly more dilute solution. It helps to concentrate the wastes in what's going to be the urine, and we can retain things that we might need in our body, like sodium chloride and water. And actually, it'll be very dilute at the point we get up here. As we go into the distal convoluted tubule, there are mechanisms that are going to further control things. Regulate specific electrolytes and that sort of thing that are going, that need to be retained or excreted, which is happening up here in the distal convoluted tubule. Let me get back to this section here. So unfortunately, there's not a picture to go with this, but let me go back to this picture just to remind you. After the filtrate has gone down the loop and become very concentrated and then gone back up and become dilute again, but retaining the waste molecules so that it's concentrated waste molecules, it goes to the distal convoluted tubule. A few more tweaks are going to get it to exactly the composition that we want. And after it leaves the distal convoluted tubule, we call it urine. That's the end of the nephron. The nephron collects to what's called the collecting duct. But the collecting duct also can play a role in what's happening in making your urine. And that's tied to the recovery of water. So there's a hormone called antidiuretic hormone. Okay, so I can see the abbreviation right there, and I don't see anything above that that actually spells it out. But antidiuretic hormone. Diuresis means to pass water. Uresis is referring to urine, and unless we specify what we're talking about, uresis just means water. So antidiuresis is the opposite of passing water, and therefore would be retaining water. And there's a hormone that's in charge of that called antidiuretic hormone. Overnight, when you're not taking in fluids, ADH will cause the kidneys to retain excess water so that you don't get dehydrated. And by pulling water out of the urine, it makes the urine more and more concentrated. Now this happens in the collecting ducts. So we're past the nephron. The loop of the nephron is where we concentrate the urine to be just waste products, and we're regulating what electrolytes and other things we want to keep and what we want to get rid of. But then when it gets to the collecting duct, antidiuretic hormone will cause the cells in the wall of the collecting duct to produce and incorporate specific channels for water molecules so that water can come out of the urine very easily. Now those channels are called aquaporin, which literally means water channel. Channel, pore, aqua, water. Without aquaporin in the walls of the channel, in the walls of the collecting duct, water will stay in the urine and your urine will be dilute. But overnight, ADH causes an upregulation of aquaporin, and so the water leaves the urine and stays in your body. The collecting ducts are going through the medullary pyramid also, so they're also taking advantage of that gradient of concentration. So as they go deeper and deeper into the medullary pyramid, more and more water will come out if aquaporin is present to concentrate that urine even more. And when you get up and first thing in the morning, go to the restroom, you're going to see the darkest urine probably of the day because you've retained all of the water and all that's in there is highly concentrated urine, and that's going to be rather dark. Okay. So the next couple of sections here in the book are addressing how we regulate the urinary system. To remind you, last time when I was wrapping things up, I pointed out that blood pressure of about 55 millimeters of mercury in the glomerular capillaries is offset by osmotic pressure and capsular pressure to get a net filtration pressure of 10 millimeters of mercury. That's a fairly narrow or low amount of pressure. If the blood pressure in your glomerular capillaries drops to 45 millimeters of mercury, then there's no net filtration pressure. So you will not filter anything out of your blood. So it's very important for the kidneys to make sure that the blood pressure in the glomeruli is high enough to drive that filtration. And the way that it does that really can be summed up in two major parts. The first major part is what we would call autoregulation, meaning the kidneys or the glomerulus itself regulating what it's doing. It can do that through two different mechanisms, myogenic and tubuloglomerular. The myogenic mechanism is really just something that we'd expect to see for pretty much any muscle tissue. So the smooth muscle in the wall of these arterioles, when muscle stretches, it reflexively contracts. Okay? And this is true for pretty much any muscle tissue. You've probably seen it if you've ever had your knee jerk reflex tested. A little rubber mallet hits the tendon coming off of your quadriceps, which stretches your quadriceps. And so the quadriceps reflexively contract, making you kick your lower leg out. That's the point of that reflex, simply put. So smooth muscle is going to do that too. If the smooth muscle in the wall of the afferent arteriole stretches out, then it will constrict to counteract that. Okay. If the diameter of the afferent arteriole is wide, resistance is low, blood flow is high. Wait, I'm saying that backwards. I'm going to mess this up if I try to say it. So let's just skip the last couple of sentences and just stick with the arterial wall. Smooth muscles stretch out and they reflexively contract. And that can help keep blood flow through the glomerular capillaries steady. Also, there's the tubuloglomerular mechanism, which is where the I can't remember right off where the picture is. No, let me find this. It's important to show this picture. I must be here. Yep, there we go. That didn't take too long. Okay, so this is part of the tubule that's either the very end of the loop or the very beginning of the distal convoluted tubule. There are specialized cells in its wall referred to as macula densa that are sensing the flow rate and the concentration of the filtrate after it's gone through the loop coming back up. If that is not at a particular homeostatic set point, then the adjacent cells, called the juxtaglomerular cells, will release signals that initiate this tubular glomerular feedback mechanism. If the Okay, give me a second, I wanna make sure I say this correctly. If what's coming through here is less concentrated or flowing less forcefully than it should, then the glomerulus is not filtering things out at the right rate. And so the juxtaglomerular cells will release signals that will cause the afferent arteriole to dilate and potentially the efferent arteriole to constrict. So if the afferent arteriole dilates, more blood comes into the glomerulus, and if the efferent arteriole is constricted, less blood can get out, increasing the blood pressure in the glomerulus and therefore increasing the flow rate and getting the flow coming back through this tube backwards, so to speak. And if the flow rate's too high in this tube, then it's sort of the opposite happens. Flow rate is decreased, taking advantage of the afferent arterioles and that sort of thing. So that is not the right section.
Question,
Yes.
you said that, is it true that the juxtaglomerular cells dilate afferent and constrict efferent?
Depends on what needs to be done. If the flow rate needs to be increased, then afferent dilates, efferent constricts. If flow rate needs to decrease, essentially the opposite happens. And I say essentially because it might not be strictly that the afferent constricts and the efferent dilates, but it will. The afferent dilating and efferent constricting is specifically to increase glomerular filtration rate. So, but if you need to do the opposite, something else will happen. One of the important players in the tubulo-glomerular feedback is nitric oxide. Have I talked about nitric oxide before?
Yes.
When did I talk about it? In the glomerulus earlier? I think when I showed you that picture last time, I probably mentioned it, but here it's just highlighting it again. Nitric oxide is actually kind of a universal signal for blood vessels to dilate. It's released from, first off, it's a gas molecule, one nitrogen atom and one oxygen atom, which is not a very stable molecule. Oxygen has an unpaired electron in that molecule, and it's not a great situation. So it's a very short-lived molecule. It will diffuse away from its source and sort of disappear pretty quickly. So it's made by the endothelial cells of blood vessels, and it causes blood vessels themselves to dilate. And so a signal is released that causes the afferent arterial endothelial cells to release nitric oxide, and it causes them to dilate. It does this all over the body, wherever we need specific dilation of blood vessels. Nitric oxide is really the main player in that, which will be important because we'll talk about nitric oxide a little bit with the reproductive system also. Or we did. I would have done that in lab. That's where it came up, lab. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so nitrates like Viagra promote nitric oxide production for the erectile tissue in the penis. And here it's used specifically for blood vessels to dilate in the glomerulus. So autoregulation is one side of what happens. It's what the kidney or the glomerulus does itself to compensate for flow. But sometimes that's not enough. And so things have to move to the systemic level. And so there are a number of hormones that play a role in this. The kidney releases a hormone called renin. I have always said that this should be pronounced renin, like I just said, because the root of it is rene, like renal, meaning kidney. But people will sometimes pronounce it renin. I've been saying that for years because I've heard it pronounced renin in this situation plenty of times, and it's technically not correct. But I was saying this to one of my classes last week, and I got an email from one of the students saying she works in some healthcare environment, I don't remember what exactly, but she talked to a number of different people about the pronunciation of that. And everybody that she talked to, and I think she might be like a drug rep or something like that. Everybody that she talked to pronounces it the correct way, renin. So I think I got people pronouncing it renin because that's what like A&P professors do or something like that. But it is renin, emphasizing the fact that it's coming from a kidney, renal source. And I say that because this is what's released from the kidney to initiate systemic changes. Renin causes the eventual production of a hormone called angiotensin II. Now, angiotensin II obviously is the second of angiotensins. There's an angiotensin I, and part of what happens in the renin-angiotensin system is there's an enzyme that converts angiotensin I to angiotensin II called angiotensin converting enzyme. You may have heard of it. So that's at play here. Angiotensin II is a fairly potent vasoconstrictor, and it'll cause vasoconstriction systemically. So your blood pressure will go up all over your body, which will therefore mean that blood pressure goes up going into your kidneys, and that'll keep filtration up. Oh, shoot. Where is that picture? Okay. Maybe this is the picture I'm looking for. Where'd that go? Here. So the kidney releases renin in the bloodstream. The liver actually releases something called angiotensinogen, and renin causes that to become angiotensin I, and then angiotensin converting enzyme converts angiotensin I into angiotensin II. Angiotensin II is then what was the word I just used? Potent vasodilator. Also, angiotensin will cause the release of aldosterone from the adrenal cortex. Aldosterone is a steroid hormone. It's a mineralocorticoid, and its release is tied to angiotensin II levels. What it does is it tells the kidney to retain sodium. And when you retain sodium, pull it out of the filtrate and get it back into the blood, it will necessarily pull water with it because of hypotonic, osmotic pressure things. Okay? Because by retaining sodium in your blood, it makes your blood hypertonic to the filtrate, and so water comes out of the filtrate to effectively dilute the sodium-rich blood. So aldosterone directly targets sodium, which ends up pulling water out of the filtrate and into the blood, increasing blood volume, and as blood volume goes up, necessarily blood pressure goes up also. And then we've already talked about antidiuretic hormone. I talked about it in the sense of keeping your body in a hydrated state overnight when you're not taking in liquids. But also it can be tied to helping regulate blood pressure because by retaining water, it will necessarily raise blood volume and therefore blood pressure. Okay, so renin, angiotensin, aldosterone either directly vasoconstrict or increase blood volume through sodium retention. ADH directly causes water retention. So all of these play a role in raising blood pressure, either directly or indirectly through raising blood volume. And so any of those will increase systemic blood pressure, which will get more blood going to the kidney and more being filtered out of the glomerulus, which might be necessary if autoregulation can play a part. Now, the book also talks about endothelin, which is another vasoconstrictor. Honestly, this is the first book that I've dealt with that talks about endothelin, and there's just that one little paragraph blurb, which is to say I've not really incorporated it into any of the graded assignments that we have. So when I'm talking about hormones and raising blood pressure, I really mean these. Those are the answers that are in the assignments that you have. If you're ever motivated to put endothelin in as an answer in an auto-corrected fill in the blank question, don't, because it's not going to be right. Then we have this paragraph here, which kind of bothers me. It's a good paragraph in that it talks about the other side of the coin. If ADH and renin-angiotensin aldosterone play a role in keeping blood pressure high systemically, these molecules keep it low. Now, natriuretic means to pass sodium in your urine. Okay. So if you excrete sodium in your urine, you're also going to excrete excess water. It's sort of the opposite of what aldosterone does. Okay. Aldosterone retains sodium and therefore water. Natriuresis is passing sodium and therefore water, lowering blood volume and lowering blood pressure. Now, the problem I have with this paragraph is that they say natriuretic hormone. Now, technically that's not incorrect because these are hormones, but they're more appropriately referred to as natriuretic peptides. There are two of these signaling molecules. They mention one of them right here, atrial natriuretic hormone. Okay. Really, it should be atrial natriuretic peptide, the abbreviation of which is ANP. They do this in this part of the chapter, referring to it by ANH, which is just not right. And pretty much everywhere else in the book they refer to that molecule, they call it peptide, they call it ANP. So just a little weird quirk here where they're introducing it. Atrial means the atrium of the heart. If blood pressure or blood volume is high, then more blood's going to get to the atrium, it's going to cause the atrial wall to stretch out. And so as a reflex or compensatory mechanism, the atrium releases these natriuretic peptides, which will cause you to excrete more sodium and therefore more water, lowering blood pressure and taking some of that pressure off of the atrial wall. And then it's natriuretic and it's a peptide hormone. There's a second one that they mention here, they call B-type natriuretic peptide, which is abbreviated BNP. Now, I'm annoyed that they call atrial natriuretic peptide atrial natriuretic hormone here, and just to compound that, when they introduce the other one, they go ahead and stick with the peptide version of the name. Whatever. So it really should be peptides. Now, the B in BNP technically stands for something else because it was originally discovered in a different organ, but it's released by the heart also. And so they call it B-type because it's like ANP and BNP are obviously in order, but technically the B stands for something else. I don't care that we know what that B stands for because that side of what the hormone does, it would just confuse the issue. These two natriuretic peptides, A and B, are released from the atrium of the heart, right atrium of the heart, primarily, and cause a decrease in blood volume through the excretion of sodium, which pulls water out of your blood. Okay. If you think of the renin-angiotensin, aldosterone, and antidiuretic hormone group as the bad guys, because raising blood pressure is bad, then the natriuretic peptides are the good guys, sort of the other side of the coin. Now, I'm characterizing it that way because we usually think of high blood pressure as being a bad thing, but for the kidney, high blood pressure can be a good thing because that will keep blood filtration up. But It's the way I'm just characterizing it. Now, I kind of wish they didn't do this, but every book does this, and it's fine. This section is addressing hormones that affect kidney function. And so they're going to include parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is released from the parathyroid gland in response to low calcium levels. Okay. And you should be aware of this already because back in AMP1, when you're learning about the bones and the fact that they store calcium, PTH is the hormone that causes bones to release calcium back into the blood. And calcitonin causes bones to store calcium. However, parathyroid hormone does a bit more than just affect the bones. It's also going to affect the kidneys because it'll tell the kidneys to retain calcium, to keep blood calcium levels up. And when blood calcium levels are high and you're not releasing PTH, then the kidneys stop retaining calcium and you excrete it in your urine. So it plays a role through the kidney, which is also going to help keep calcium levels up. It has nothing to do with blood pressure. It's only about calcium homeostasis. It just happens to be on this page with a bunch of other things that are involved in blood pressure. So that's why it's a little annoying. I would have preferred that they put this paragraph underneath this table just to really separate it out as something different. But this table addresses a number of different things that play a role. The ones that were listed up there are the main ones that I'm concerned with, but the sympathetic system can affect blood pressure. Angiotensin 2, we already said. Endothelin, I said, this first place has been introduced. It's not going to be the answer to any questions in this my assignments. And then vasodilators, we haven't really looked at those. I mentioned nitric oxide. And then ANP and BNP, see, they actually call it ANP here, not ANH, are not so much vasodilators. They might have a little bit of that, but they're more directly related to blood volume adjustments. But these are various things that kind of all play a role. The table doesn't really fit in perfectly with all the things that this section of the book lists, but definitely notice that there's not anything about parathyroid hormone in here, okay? Because it is not involved in blood pressure regulation or glomerular filtration rate or anything like that. So this section of what's written here really should be underneath the table just to set it aside as something different. Okay. But all of these things play a role there. I was about to say the last couple don't have any real pictures. There is obviously this picture, but it's just showing you the chemical structures that are related to nitrogen waste molecules. So urea and uric acid and ammonia are a few of the components of urine, and urea and uric acid, the names reflect the word urine, because those are sort of the main things that we get rid of as waste products. And this is just an overview of some of the homeostatic mechanisms, which for what I'm interested you paying attention to, we've already covered. So blood pressure homeostasis, calcium homeostasis, those sorts of things we've already covered, but it mentions a couple of other things here. There might be a little bit added to, and actually I showed you the picture for renin-angiotensin. It's in this section, but I'm not going to ask you anything about vitamin D synthesis or erythropoiesis here. Erythropoiesis we covered in the blood chapter. Vitamin D technically was covered in the skin chapter, although I don't really stress it there either. Like after the digestive system, there's another chapter after the urinary system. With the digestive system, I did go into that chapter a little bit to talk about metabolism and nutrition. I am not going to go into this chapter to go into more detail about fluid or electrolyte balance stuff, anything, and acid-base balance. Anything that I want to address about that is already in the chapter on the urinary system, and this part just goes into more detail. You will not have anything drawing on chapter 26. There are no questions in the part 1, 2, 3, or 4 assignments for this chapter, for chapter 25 that draw on that. Technically, chapter 23 drew a little bit on chapter 24. So we're just going to skip chapter 26. And so next time we're going to pick up with the reproductive system. We did the male reproductive system in lab. We're going to concentrate on the female reproductive system stuff with the lecture material. So that's all I have for the urinary system. We've got plenty of time. I can cover what I need to for the reproductive system Thursday this week and Tuesday next week. So I'll go ahead and dismiss you early. We're done. See some of you tomorrow, the rest of you on Thursday.